Here's a Tesla with its autopilot feature. Now, whether now or in 10 years autonomous cars will happen, it's just a question of how much autonomy and where it's used. Some, on one side, let's say Elon Musk, would want to argue it's already here, and some on the side, let's say, of the large automobile manufacturers might say this is 10 or 20 years away, depending again on what your definition of autonomy is. But this is a very old field of research. We may have been just reading about it in the popular press for the last 5 or 10 years. But in fact, there's 30 plus years of research on autonomous cars. And when I was a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon in the early 90s, there used to be a truck that drove through Shenley Park next to the Carnegie Mellon campus. Now, it drove rather slowly at maybe 5 or 7 miles per hour, and it had 10 or 20 Sun Microsystems workstations in the back, but it was autonomous driving. And I would claim that those researchers, as well as the car companies recently, have primarily looked at this bottom user-centered level, primarily looked at the driver and how to deal with the driver and replace the driver. So they might look at what does the driver see on displays, such as the large display in the center console of the Tesla, which I could go on about is a true usability nightmare and another place for a lot of accidents, but I'll ignore that for today. Or more importantly, what does the driver see when they're in this autopilot mode? Here behind the steering wheel, what it should show, maybe how to get attention of the driver when the system's less sure. Maybe it's inferences it's less sure about them due to weather, or due to lack of recent mapping, or due to other cars' behavior. I would say almost all of that is mainly at the driver level. But these other levels of analysis are quite important to solving or even posing the problem correctly. At the community level, we certainly care about other drivers and their behaviors, whether they're in autonomous cars or non-autonomous cars. We care about studying interactions with pedestrians and bicyclists. And so I'll note, I don't know how many of you see autonomous cars driving around Seoul every day, but in the Bay Area, we do see many autonomous cars, especially autonomous cars that are training all over my neighborhood in Palo Alto. And one thing they learned is folks who are in non-autonomous cars change their behavior when they're around autonomous cars. And unfortunately, this is something these companies didn't even really look into until they deployed in the real world. And if they had thought about this and researched it, they might have clearly known this would occur. Now, in terms of bicyclists and pedestrians, these other levels, I think, have been afterthoughts for these efforts and have led to many of the problems that might have been avoided had they been considered much earlier on in the conception of autonomous driving. At the society level, we need to consider the impacts of autonomous cars on a city or a region. Maybe the impacts are not as positive as the enthusiasts might lead you to believe. Some studies have shown that autonomous cars will lead to more traffic and more deaths due to driving more miles, living further away, and sending cars around empty. On the Stanford campus, it's about 30 to 40 miles to San Francisco, depending where I'm going. Maybe I would take an autonomous car and have it drop me off, and I'm not going to pay $50 or $60 US to park. I'll just send my autonomous car back to my house, or send it, to a neighborhood 15 miles away that's cheaper to park. So we're going to see a lot of cars moving around empty without people in them. These aren't just newspaper headlines. They're based on research, for example, by transportation experts at the University of Texas, who found, at least in the Texas Triangle mega region, which is the Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio area, autonomous cars will likely swamp traffic due to changes that these AI-based cars will bring. So they'll bring this change in terms of people living further away from where they work and driving their autonomous car. Maybe I drive at 6 in the morning and sleep while my car brings me the 2 hours to work. Or maybe I'm a professor, so I work on PowerPoint slides on my way to work. Whatever it is, more miles driven, more empty cars will lead to changes and lead to more traffic. Now, with this analysis at this level from the start, we might decide that our societal resources might be better spent on building a better public transit system. So maybe here in Seoul, I've been to Seoul many times, I've experienced a lot of traffic, even though we have a great public transit system and an incredible number of trains and buses. Maybe we'd want to expand that even more to avoid that traffic that will only get worse potentially with autonomous cars. So if we only analyze and design at that user-centered level, at the bottom level, which I would say is now the standard practice of any computing company today, they design at that level at the bottom. But if we only do that from the start, we might ignore these important questions and until it's too late to make a different decision. I would claim in the United States, there's already been a decision, not with the public, but by the government and by those in power, that autonomous cars are our future, and a lot of money has been invested in allowing that to be the future. And these are real questions of power. Who has the power to choose what we do with our societal resources? And right now, that power is concentrated in large companies that control these large AI models. This recognition of power reminds me of a great talk I saw last fall by Ibram X. Kendi, the well-known author and MacArthur Genius Grant winner. He was visiting the Rhode Island School of Design for the inauguration of the new president, Crystal Williams. And Crystal Williams asked him, Dr. Kendi, what can artists and designers do in creating an anti-racist society? And I thought his response was very interesting with respect to this question of power. He replied, what is missing is an analysis of power. Bring an understanding to people about power. We live in a moment when different identity groups are advocating for their rights, their power, their presence, and pushing back against ways they've been degraded. What is missing are the bridges of solidarity. We need to constantly be building those bridges. Historically, you know who has built those bridges? Artists and designers. So I believe as a designer, we need to take on the analysis of design at the three levels I've advocated, the user, the community, and society, so we can properly identify and take on power, so we can build those bridges of solidarity. What I want to take away from this introduction is that there are many great applications where we can help use AI to help people be better at the tasks that make them human. So to augment people to be better learners, better designers, or take better care of their body. But the key is to keep users, communities, and society's needs at the center of these smart interface designs. It's critical that we design at these three levels. We're really in the very early stages of finding the right design practices to practice truly human-centered AI. And I think for those of you out in the audience who are developers or making decisions in your companies about this, that you can start by simply designing with the communities that are beyond your direct user population. And if you do, you will create AI systems that are more likely to have a positive societal impact. Thank you.